Skip Bayless just said something about Shedeur Sanders that a lot of people didn't think they'd ever hear. And I'm not talking about some backhanded compliment or some he's good but type of statement. I'm talking about genuine acknowledgement from Skip about a Sanders. And if you know anything about how Skip has talked about that family over the years, you know this hits different. But here's what really gets me. This isn't just about Skip changing his mind. This is about what Shedeur had to go through in Cleveland to even get to this point. Because the respect he's earning now, it didn't come easy. It came through silence, through patience, through watching other guys get opportunities he probably should have had earlier. And the way this whole thing unfolded, man, it raises questions that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So let's walk through this. Because if you just look at the headline, Skip Bayless praises Shedeur Sanders, you miss the whole story. You miss the context. You miss the timeline. And you definitely miss the uncomfortable parts. Shedeur Sanders was drafted by the Cleveland Browns. That alone was a story. The son of Deion Sanders, one of the most polarizing figures in football, going to one of the most scrutinized franchises in the league. The expectations were insane from day one. But here's the thing. Shedeur never asked for any of that. He didn't choose his last name. He didn't choose the media circus that follows his father everywhere. He just showed up to play football. And from what we've seen, he handled it the right way. Kept his head down, did the work, didn't complain publicly, didn't make demands. He did everything you're supposed to do as a rookie quarterback. But let's be real about what happened in Cleveland. Because this isn't a clean story. This isn't one of those feel-good rookie tales where the young guy comes in, earns the job, and everyone's happy. This was messy. This was uncomfortable. And if you were paying attention, it didn't always make sense. The Browns drafted Shedeur knowing what they were getting. They watched the tape. They saw what he did at Colorado. They saw the poise, the arm talent, the decision-making. They knew he was pro-ready. But when training camp started, it became clear pretty quickly that Shedeur wasn't going to be handed anything. And look, I get it. You don't just give a rookie the starting job because of hype. You make them earn it. That's how it should work. But here's where it gets weird. Shedeur wasn't just competing with established veterans. He was behind guys who, let's be honest, hadn't exactly proven they were the answer either. From what we saw in camp, Shedeur was getting limited reps. Not 0 reps, but definitely not the kind of reps you'd expect for a first-round quarterback who's supposed to be the future. And the explanations for it? They kept changing. First, it was about letting him learn the system. Okay, fair. Then it was about not rushing him. Also fair. Then it was about the veterans needing to see if they could still do it. And that's where I start to raise an eyebrow. Because at a certain point, you have to ask, are we developing this kid, or are we protecting egos? The depth chart decisions were wild to watch. Because based on what we were seeing in practice clips, based on what reporters were saying, based on the body language from coaches, it looked like Shedeur was ready. But he kept getting leapfrogged. Guys who had been in the league for years, guys who had already shown their ceiling, were getting the nod ahead of him. And every time it happened, the explanation was always the same. We're taking it slow with Shedeur. We want to make sure he's ready. But how is he supposed to get ready if he's not getting real reps? How is he supposed to show he's ready if he's not getting the chance? And this isn't me saying Shedeur should have started week 1. That's not the point. The point is the pattern. The point is how it looked. Because when you're watching a young quarterback who's clearly talented, who's clearly composed, who's clearly doing everything right, and he's still not getting the opportunity, you start to wonder what's really going on. Then you had the media circus. And this is where it got really messy. Because every single move Shedeur made was being analyzed through the lens of his last name. Every time he threw a bad pass in practice, it was national news. Every time he had a good day, people were looking for reasons to downplay it. Oh, it's just practice. Oh, it's against the second team defense. But when the other quarterbacks had good days, suddenly that was proof they deserved to start. The double standard was obvious, and Shedeur had to sit there and watch it happen. Had to watch people question his legitimacy while guys with worse resumes were getting chances ahead of him. And through all of that, Shedeur stayed quiet. That's what gets me. He didn't go to social media. He didn't have his dad fighting his battles in the press. He didn't leak anything to reporters. He just kept working, kept showing up, kept doing the job. And that's the kind of maturity that's rare in a rookie. That's the kind of composure that usually takes years to develop. But he had it from day one. Now let's talk about what Skip Bayless said, because this is where the whole thing comes full circle. Skip has never been shy about his opinions on the Sanders family. He's gone at Dion for years. He's questioned his coaching. He's questioned his motivations. He's been one of the loudest critics of the whole Colorado experiment. So when Skip starts talking about Shedeur, you expect more of the same. You expect the skepticism. You expect the he's overhyped because of his name take. But that's not what happened. Skip watched what Shedeur went through in Cleveland. He watched him sit. He watched him wait. He watched him stay professional. And Skip acknowledged it. He called out Shedeur's poise. He called out his patience. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but this is the essence of it, that Shedeur handled a difficult situation with maturity beyond his years, that he didn't let the chaos around him affect his approach, that he earned respect the hard way. And listen, coming from Skip, that means something, because Skip doesn't give compliments lightly, especially not to the Sanders family. So for him to say that on air, in front of his audience, that's significant. That's a shift. But here's what's uncomfortable about this whole thing. Here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud. Shedeur had to prove himself in a way that other rookie quarterbacks didn't. He had to show more patience, more composure, more professionalism. Because if he had done anything else, if he had complained, if he had gone to the media, if he had let his frustration show, it would have been used against him. It would have been proof that he was entitled. Proof that he thought he was special because of his last name. Proof that he couldn't handle adversity. So he had no choice but to be perfect. And that's the part that raises questions. Two things can be true at once. Shedeur is a talented quarterback who's going to have a real career in this league. And Shedeur had to navigate a situation that was stacked against him in ways that had nothing to do with his ability. Both of those things are true. And pretending like one cancels out the other is just dishonest. Let's talk about the timeline in more detail, because the more you break it down, the more uncomfortable it gets. During the preseason, Shedeur was getting third-team reps, not second team, third team. And look, I understand that rookies have to earn their way up, but when you watch the film, when you see what he was doing with those reps, he wasn't making rookie mistakes. He wasn't hesitant. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was making quick decisions. He was putting the ball where it needed to be. He was moving the offense. And yet, the narrative kept being, he's not ready yet. Meanwhile, the guys ahead of him were struggling, visibly struggling, making the kind of mistakes that get quarterbacks benched. But the leash they had was so much longer than anything Shedeur was being given. And that's where it starts to feel less like development and more like something else. There were moments during training camp where reporters would tweet things like, Shedeur Sanders looked sharp today, made several tight window throws, moved well in the pocket. And then a few hours later, the depth chart would come out and he'd still be third string. And you're sitting there thinking, what does he have to do? What's the standard here? Because it seems like the standard keeps moving. And then you had the veteran quarterbacks. Guys who had been in the league long enough to know how this works. And from what we could see, there was respect there. Shedeur wasn't causing problems in the locker room. He wasn't creating division. But there's also a reality that when a highly drafted rookie comes in, it creates pressure on everybody. Because everyone knows what the plan is eventually. Everyone knows that at some point, the franchise is going to want to see what they have in the young guy. So there's this tension, and that tension doesn't always bring out the best in organizational decision-making. This isn't about accusing anyone of anything. This is about acknowledging that the situation was complicated, that there were competing interests, that Shedeur was navigating a political landscape as much as he was navigating a football one, and he did it without making a single wrong move publicly. Now let's talk about what the fans were seeing, because fan reaction tells you a lot about how this whole thing was being perceived. Browns fans are passionate. They're loyal. They're also exhausted. They've been through decades of quarterback disappointment. So when the team drafts Shedeur Sanders, there's this split reaction. Part of the fan base is excited. Finally, a real prospect. A guy who could actually be the answer. But another part of the fan base is skeptical. Here we go again. Another overhyped quarterback. Another media circus. And Shedeur had to win both groups over. From what we saw online, from what we heard in Cleveland, the fan base started to shift pretty quickly. Because once people actually watched Shedeur play, once they saw how he carried himself, once they saw that he wasn't his father, opinions started to change. You'd see tweets like, "Okay, I wasn't sure about Shedeur at first, but this kid can play." Or, "Why are we not giving him more reps?" Or, "He's handling this situation better than I would." And that groundswell of support started to put pressure on the organization, because fans were asking the same questions a lot of us were asking. Why is he still third string? What does he have to do to get a real shot? Is this about football or is this about something else? But here's the thing. Shedeur never fed into that. He never used the fans as leverage. He never played the victim. He just kept his head down and worked. And that's what ultimately earned him the respect he's getting now. Not just from Skip Bayless, but from people across the league who were watching how he handled this. Let's talk about the media cycle for a second. Because the way the national media covered this was telling. You had some people who were all in on Shedeur from the start. People who believed in his talent and thought the Browns were mishandling him. But you also had people who were just waiting for him to fail, waiting for him to crack, waiting for him to prove that he was just another entitled kid who couldn't handle real adversity. And the fact that he never gave them that moment, that drove some people crazy. There were segments on sports shows where analysts were openly wondering why Shedeur wasn't playing more. And then there were other segments where analysts were defending the Browns' decision to bring him along slowly. And both sides had valid points. But what nobody was talking about was the optics. Nobody was talking about how it looked to have a black quarterback with a famous last name sitting on the bench, while less talented white quarterbacks got extended opportunities. And I'm not saying that's definitely what was happening. I'm saying it's a question that was in the air. A question that people were uncomfortable asking out loud. And Shedeur had to exist in that space. Had to know that every decision the Browns made about him was being analyzed through multiple lenses. Had to know that he couldn't afford to make any mistakes, on or off the field, because the scrutiny was so intense. This isn't excuses. This is context. Because when Skip Bayless talks about Shedeur's poise, he's not just talking about how Shedeur throws a football. He's talking about how Shedeur navigated all of this. How he stayed composed when the situation would have broken a lot of other rookies. Now, let's be clear about something. Shedeur Sanders is not a perfect quarterback. No rookie is. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to have bad games. He's going to go through the same growing pains every young quarterback goes through. But the way he's built, the way he's wired, he's got a real chance to be special. And the fact that he had to prove himself in a more difficult environment than most, that might actually end up being good for him in the long run, because he's learning how to handle adversity now. He's learning how to block out noise now. He's learning how to stay focused when everything around him is chaotic. But it shouldn't have had to be that hard. That's the part that sits wrong with me. Let's talk about what happens next. Because the story isn't over. Shedeur is going to get his shot eventually. Whether it's in Cleveland or somewhere else, he's too talented not to. And when he does, all eyes are going to be on him. The expectations are going to be massive. The pressure is going to be intense. But based on what we've seen so far, he can handle it. The question is, how will the organization support him? Because it's one thing to draft a quarterback. It's another thing to actually develop him, to put him in a position to succeed, to build around him. And Cleveland's track record on that is, well, not great. But here's what gives me hope. The fact that people like Skip Bayless are starting to acknowledge what Shedeur is doing, that means the narrative is shifting. It means people are seeing past the last name. It means they're evaluating him on his merits. And that's all Shedeur has ever wanted. There's also the question of how this affects other young quarterbacks. Because if Shedeur succeeds despite everything he went through, it sets a precedent. It shows that you can come from a high-profile family, deal with massive expectations, navigate organizational politics, and still make it. And that's going to inspire other kids who are in similar situations. But it also raises the bar. Because now, every young quarterback with a famous last name is going to be compared to how Shedeur handled his situation. Well, Shedeur didn't complain. Shedeur stayed patient. Why can't you? And that's not entirely fair either. Because everyone's situation is different. Everyone's support system is different. Everyone's mental makeup is different. What we're seeing with Shedeur is rare. The combination of talent, composure, maturity, and patience, that's not something you can coach. That's something that's either in you or it's not. And Shedeur has it. Let's go back to Skip for a second, because I want to dig into why his comments matter so much. Skip Bayless has built a career on hot takes, on controversy, on saying things that get people riled up. But every once in a while, Skip says something that's genuinely insightful, something that cuts through all the noise and gets to the heart of what's actually happening. And what he said about Shedeur was one of those moments. He didn't have to say it. He could have just kept criticizing the Sanders family. He could have stuck to his usual script, but he didn't. He looked at what Shedeur did, and he gave credit where credit was due. And that takes a certain kind of honesty, a certain kind of willingness to admit when you might have been wrong about something. And the fact that Skip specifically called out Shedeur's poise, that's important. Because poise is one of those intangible qualities that you can't fake. You either have it or you don't. And Shedeur has it in a way that's unusual for someone his age. He doesn't get rattled, he doesn't panic, he doesn't let external pressure affect his internal state. And in the NFL, where the game moves so fast and the margin for error is so small, that kind of poise is invaluable. But here's what I keep coming back to. The fact that Shedeur had to display that level of poise just to get basic respect, that tells you something about the environment he was in. That tells you something about the obstacles he was facing. Because most rookie quarterbacks don't have to prove their maturity before they even get a real chance to play. Most rookie quarterbacks get to develop in relative privacy. But Shedeur never had that luxury. From the moment he got drafted, every single thing he did was national news. Every practice rep, every off-season workout, every social media post. He was under a microscope in a way that very few players ever experience. And he handled it. Never once did he give people ammunition to use against him. Never once did he make the story about himself instead of the team. And that's what Skip was acknowledging. Not just the talent, not just the arm strength or the accuracy or the decision-making. The intangibles. The things that don't show up on a stat sheet, but matter just as much. Now let's talk about the fan perspective on all of this. Because fans are the ones who have to live with these decisions. Fans are the ones who are emotionally invested in a way that coaches and executives and media members aren't. Browns fans have been burned so many times. They've seen so many quarterbacks come and go. They've seen so many false hopes and failed experiments. So when Shedeur Sanders came in, there was this collective holding of breath. Is this finally the one? Or is this just another disappointment waiting to happen? And what's interesting is how quickly a lot of fans came around on Shedeur. Because once they saw past the hype, once they saw the work ethic and the humility and the way he carried himself, they realized, this kid is different. This kid actually gets it. He understands what it means to play in Cleveland. He understands the weight of expectations, and he's not running from it. You could see it in the reactions online. Every time there was a report about Shedeur doing something positive in practice, Browns fans would be in the comments saying things like, "Just put him in already," or "We're wasting time with these other guys." There was this growing sense of frustration that the organization wasn't giving the fans what they wanted to see. But Shedeur never exploited that. He never tried to position himself as the people's quarterback or play politics with the fan base. He just stayed in his lane and let his work speak for itself. And that's why the respect he's earning now feels genuine. Because it's not manufactured. It's not the result of some PR campaign. It's organic. It's based on what people have actually seen from him. There's also this interesting dynamic with Dion, because you can't talk about Shedeur without talking about his father. And Dion's presence looms large over everything Shedeur does. Some people see it as an advantage, having a Hall of Fame father who can mentor you and guide you through the league. But it's also a burden, because you're constantly being compared, constantly being asked, "Are you as good as your dad was?" Constantly having your accomplishments attributed to your last name instead of your own ability. And what Shedeur has done is create his own identity. He's not trying to be Dion. He's not trying to replicate what his father did. He's being Shedeur. And that's probably the smartest thing he could have done. Because the worst thing you can do as the son of a legend is try to become that legend. You have to be your own person. And Shedeur figured that out early. From what we've seen, Dion has been supportive but not overbearing. He's not calling up Browns coaches. He's not going on TV demanding his son play. He's letting Shedeur handle this on his own. And that's probably been huge for Shedeur's development, because he's had to sink or swim on his own merits. He's had to earn respect on his own terms. Let's talk about the coaching staff for a second, because they're the ones making the decisions about when Shedeur plays and how much. From the outside looking in, it seems like there's been some disagreement internally about how to handle Shedeur. You had some coaches who wanted to throw him in there right away, who believed he was ready, who thought the best way to develop him was to let him play through mistakes. But you also had other coaches who were more conservative, who wanted to bring him along slowly, who were worried about damaging his confidence if things went wrong early. And both approaches have merit. There's no one right way to develop a quarterback. Some guys benefit from sitting and learning. Other guys benefit from getting thrown into the fire immediately. It depends on the individual. It depends on the situation. But with Shedeur, it felt like the conservative approach went on longer than it needed to. It felt like at a certain point, the concerns about protecting him became an excuse to not make a decision. Because starting a rookie quarterback is risky. It opens you up to criticism if it doesn't work. It puts pressure on the entire organization. And sometimes, coaches and executives avoid that pressure by just waiting, by kicking the can down the road, by convincing themselves that they're being patient when really they're just being cautious. And Shedeur was caught in the middle of that. He was ready before they were ready to let him play. And that's frustrating, both for him and for the fans who were watching. But again, and I can't stress this enough, Shedeur never complained, never pushed back publicly, never made it a story. And that level of professionalism is what's earning him respect now. Because people in the league see that, coaches see that, executives see that, and they know that when they do finally give Shedeur his shot, he's going to be ready, because he's been preparing for it all along. Let's talk about what this means for Shedeur's future, because the way he's handled this situation is going to benefit him for years to come. First, he's proven that he can handle pressure, and in the NFL, that's everything, because the pressure never goes away. It only gets more intense as you get better, and the expectations grow. But Shedeur has already been through a pressure cooker. He's already dealt with the media circus. He's already navigated organizational dysfunction. So when he gets to the next level, when he's actually the starter and leading a team, he's going to have that experience to draw on. Second, he's built credibility with his teammates because they've seen how he's carried himself. They've seen that he's not entitled, that he's not trying to take shortcuts, that he's willing to wait his turn and earn his opportunity. And that matters in a locker room, because if your teammates believe in you, if they respect you, they're going to play harder for you. They're going to have your back when things get tough. Third, he's changed the narrative. The story is no longer, is Shedeur Sanders just famous because of his last name? The story is now, Shedeur Sanders is earning respect the right way. And that's a powerful shift. Because once you change the narrative, it's hard to change it back. But there's still a long way to go. Shedeur hasn't played meaningful snaps yet. He hasn't proven he can do it on Sundays when the games actually count. And that's the next test. That's the one that really matters. When he does get his chance, and he will, the expectations are going to be enormous. People are going to expect him to play like a veteran from day one. They're going to expect him to be perfect. And that's not realistic. Every rookie makes mistakes. Every young quarterback goes through growing pains. But because of who Shedeur is, because of everything he's been through to get to this point, those mistakes are going to be magnified, and he's going to have to handle that the same way he's handled everything else. With composure, with patience, with focus. The other thing that's interesting is how this affects the Browns' decision-making going forward. Because they've invested a lot in Shedeur. They've spent a high pick on him. They've dealt with all the media attention that comes with him. And at some point, they're going to have to commit to him as their franchise quarterback. Or they're going to have to move on. And that decision is going to be complicated, because if Shedeur succeeds, the Browns look smart for drafting him. But if he struggles, they're going to face massive criticism for how they handled his development. Did we ruin another quarterback? Did we waste another pick? Did we mess this up like we've messed up everything else? That pressure is real, and it's going to influence how the organization approaches Shedeur's development from here on out. There's also the question of what other teams are thinking, because if the Browns don't fully commit to Shedeur, if they continue to hesitate, or if things don't work out, there are going to be teams lining up to take a chance on him. Because the talent is obvious, the character is obvious, and sometimes all a player needs is a change of scenery, a fresh start, an organization that believes in them from day one. So in some ways, this story is just beginning. We're still in the early chapters, and how it ends depends on a lot of factors that are outside of Shedeur's control. But what he can control, his preparation, his attitude, his work ethic, he's already handling at an elite level. Let me bring this back to Skip Bayless one more time. Because what Skip said matters not just because of who Skip is, but because of what it represents. It represents a shift in how people are viewing Shedeur. It represents an acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, this kid is the real deal. Not because of his last name, not because of hype, but because of what he's shown on and off the field. And that acknowledgement is going to open doors for Shedeur. It's going to change how other analysts talk about him. It's going to change how other coaches and executives evaluate him. It's going to change the entire conversation around him. But it also raises the stakes. Because now, there's no more room for excuses. Now everyone knows what Shedeur is capable of. So when he does get his opportunity, the expectations are going to be through the roof. And that's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because it means people believe in him. It means he's earned respect. It means he's no longer just Dion's kid. He's Shedeur Sanders. He's his own player, his own person. But it's a curse because the margin for error just got a lot smaller. Because now, if he fails, it's on him. There's no one else to blame. There's no more, he wasn't given a fair shot, or the organization mishandled him. If he gets his opportunity and doesn't take advantage of it, that's his responsibility. And that's a lot of weight to carry. But based on everything we've seen, Shedeur can handle it. Here's what we know for sure. Shedeur Sanders is talented. He's composed. He's patient. He's mature. He's handled a difficult situation with grace and professionalism. And he's earning respect from people who didn't think they'd ever respect a Sanders. But here's what we don't know. We don't know when he's going to get his real opportunity. We don't know how the organization is going to support him when he does. We don't know if the Browns are fully committed to him as their future. We don't know how he's going to perform when the games actually count. We don't know if the way he was brought along was about genuine development or something else. We don't know if the obstacles he faced were just part of the normal rookie experience, or if there were other factors at play. We don't know if he would have gotten his opportunity sooner if his last name was different. These are uncomfortable questions, but they're real questions. And they matter, because Shedeur's story isn't just about one player, it's about how organizations handle young quarterbacks. It's about how the media treats players with famous families. It's about the expectations we place on rookies. It's about the politics that exist in every locker room and every front office. And right now, we're all just watching it unfold. Skip Bayless acknowledged Shedeur's poise. And that's significant. But it's also just the beginning. What happens next? That's the question. And nobody has the answer yet.